So tonight I saw the extended cut of Spider-Man No Way Home, aka Spider-Man No Way Home, the more fun stuff version. Yeah, I think it's a dumb title too. Now, I've already done a full review of Spider-Man No Way Home back when it came out last December. Let me just make sure. Yeah. So I've already done a full review of this movie, and the simple rundown, my second favorite Spider-Man movie behind the first Amazing Spider-Man. I think it's very well written, which is surprising because I think Far From Home is the worst MCU film. I think that one is not very well written. The comedy is kind of cringe-inducing. The action sequences aren't especially great, and the villain is horrendous. But this one was definitely an improvement over that one, and over Homecoming as well, which I see as a decent film, a really good movie by Marvel standards, but not great as far as Spider-Man standards, if you know what I mean. Like, the meme that was going around is, it's a good Marvel movie, but a bad Spider-Man movie. It's kind of true, though. Like, as far as an MCU film goes, as a Marvel film, it's great. As a Spider-Man film, it's not terrible, but it does kind of fall a bit flat. It does kind of fall a bit flat. But I still like it. Far From Home, I've come around on a bit more. I still don't like it. I think it's one of the only MCU films that I think is really hard to watch, especially with the cringe-inducing comedy. But yeah. So I've already done a full review of No Way Home. I think it's a really well-written movie. I think the villains are all great. Of course, I like Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield returning. I like the cameo by Matt Murdock. I like all the characters. I like all their interactions. I like how this movie upped the stakes, finally, because the first two films seemed completely devoid of stakes or consequences. Then this one finally amped it up with the death of Aunt May, and with Peter's actions harming everyone around him and impeding their lives. And I like that this movie didn't turn his identity crisis into a running joke like I thought they were going to. So they took this story very seriously, which I was very happy about. But I've already done a full, 15-minute review of this movie. Go watch that if you want to know my full thoughts on the movie. But I want to talk about the new scenes, which I have on my notes right over here. So yes, of course there's going to be spoilers for this new version. I actually went and wrote down every new scene so that I wouldn't forget, and because there are some of these I probably would have forgotten. Now, I want to say something right off the bat. The point of an extended cut is to do at least one of these things. It should enhance the story, maybe have the story you're telling make a bit more sense, or just to have more fun with it. This version is called the more fun stuff version after all. So that's what an extended cut should do. Unfortunately, I don't think the people making this movie got the memo. Now, I'm not saying these scenes are terrible, but let's just get into it. First things first, there's an extended sequence of him at school the day after people find out he's Spider-Man. Or not the day after, or is it the day after? Or you know what I mean, when he goes back to school. There's an extended version of that now, where certain things go on, where they have him climb up the wall during gym class, and him kind of walking around with Ned and MJ, and it's this feels pretty realistic. I kind of wish these scenes were actually in the original cut. This is something else that should be great with extended versions, is that you should see these scenes and say, why were these cut? But the problem with a lot of these scenes, I kind of got the sense of why were these shot in the first place? Because a lot of these scenes are just kind of ones you see on YouTube. You're like, oh, it was interesting, and then you never watch it again. That's kind of what a lot of these are. But these, I feel like, could have been back in, because it shows how it kind of shows that it's also affecting Ned and MJ a bit. So I like these little clips. Unfortunately, it's intercut with interview sequences with Betty Brant and various characters, be it from the teachers and the coach, with Ned and Flash, and eventually one at the end with Peter. One that doesn't go very long, but these sequences, not only was this sequence extremely long, it wasn't very funny, and I don't, and this seems like something. This seems like something that would have been done as promotional material, like something there was like interviews with like the characters within it for Maze Runner: The Scorch Trials, and that was used as promotional material. These like interview sequences feels like something that would have been posted on Sony's YouTube channel a couple of weeks before the movie came out. So that did, not only was it not very well, not only was it not funny, it was a long. It took like 5 minutes of the movie, and because there's a reason there were 11 new minutes of footage. Most of that's just from a couple of these scenes that are super long. But yeah, so we'll move on from that. The next up was an extended montage at the Sanctum Sanctorum, and like when they're getting everything ready to start tracking the variants, the villains, they decided that there was extra room to have Ned constantly knock stuff over and break stuff with Monster Mash playing in the background. And I actually had to go back and check to make sure this wasn't in the original cut, because I remember sitting there thinking, I don't remember this, but I could be wrong. No, I went back and checked. This was in the extended cut. Why Monster Mash? Why? And what is the purpose of having Ned just knock all this shit over and break shit? It was kind of funny the first time he did it, but by the time the third time he did it, it wore a little thin. I'm like, this is all this extended version of this is. It was perfectly fine. Again, this is something like, why did they bother filming this? What's the point? So then there's an extended scene of J. Jonah Jameson doing a report for the Bugle when you remember the scene where he's like promoting like some kind of pill, I don't know, and then he gets a call that somebody is tracking, that one of his like people is tracking Peter. They decided to have a little scene before that where he talks to a construction worker who saw the battle between Peter and Sandman and Electro. And it's pretty funny. I thought it was pretty funny. The way he was kind of describing the battle, like he was fighting with the Dirt Man to fight some kind of electric monster. Right after Jameson calls this guy a viable source. And he's like, okay, and we'll be right back after we figure out what was in his thermos. That was pretty funny. I understand why it was cut. That's one of those things I'm like, okay, that's a scene I would have seen on YouTube. I'm like, oh, that's not too bad. Earlier on in the movie, which one I had forgotten to write down until later on, a lot of people knew that there was a cameo that was filmed by Tom Holland's brother Harry, where he played like a drug dealer that Peter catches, and that was the sequence where someone throws paint on his suit. And a lot of people like caused a big outcry about the fact that it was announced that it was cut. After seeing this, there's a reason it was cut. Not only is this another super long scene that's just there for more bad jokes, it seems like they pushed all of the bad jokes into the deleted scenes. It seems like if it was a scene purely made for comedy and it wasn't funny, it got the axe. So, this scene, I understand. I remember saying, I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about this. When he immediately showed up on screen, because I immediately recognized, I'm like, oh, this is it. So I'm like, okay, I'm curious what they're going to do here. Or maybe it was just him catching him, like, okay, it's just another few, like, 10 seconds of footage. No, then there's, like, a really bad comedy routine that goes on for, like, a minute and a half before moving things along. So that was pointless, and again, it wasn't very funny, and it deserved to get the axe. Then there's, of course, that clip that was on YouTube of them, of like 10 seconds. It was Peter, May, and the villains just standing around awkwardly, in the crowded awkwardly in the elevator going up to Happy's place. It is a cute scene, but then after that, there's a short scene with Happy and Matthew Murdock, where they're kind of going through his, like, legal stuff as well. It's not, like, in court, which I assumed it was going to be when I heard there was going to be another Matt Murdock scene. I don't exactly know what was going on there, but... And then we actually see Happy watch the cam while they're walking past, instead of just them walking by the camera and then cutting to Happy later saying, I saw the cam footage. We actually see him watch them walk by his camera. And not only is that pretty funny, Now, it also gives another cameo to Matt Murdock, which is always welcome. And it actually brings up something that I kind of thought about earlier. It's like Murdoch says that he's going to need a really good lawyer because his legal troubles haven't stopped, even though Peters has, because the Stark technology is like under investigation and everything. And since he worked for Stark Industries, obviously, he's obviously under a lot of heat right now. But it seems like the rest of the movie, he was off the he seemed like he was off the hook, and that didn't make a ton of sense. So adding this scene back in, this is another scene that I feel like should have been in the theatrical cut. Not only is it pretty funny, and it gives another scene for Charlie Cox, it does kind of fix a problem I had with the original that I realized, like, as I was watching it. When that scene came up, I'm like, oh yeah, we never see... He always just seemed like he was off the hook after that. So, like, yeah, I feel like this scene should have been left in. And it was only, like, 30 seconds, so I feel like it could have been fine. And then there's the extended sequence of this on the scaffolding where the three Spider-Men are just talking. Now, again, this is another point where I feel like trimming it down was the right move. Because there's some added dialogue here, and it's always fun to see them talking, because I said my favorite scene in this movie was just the three of them talking on the scaffolding before the final battle. And this is the scene that's a bit extended. And while it's not bad, I feel like trimming it down was the right move because the dialogue that was cut isn't really the most important of dialogue needed for the scene. It feels like, okay, so it really seems like I have to give tremendous credit to the editors for the movie. Other than that one fight scene between Peter and the Goblin at the end of the movie, where the brutal fist fight, I remember that looking real bad. It doesn't look as bad as I remember, but it still suffers from way too many close-ups, too many cuts, and too much shaky cam. But other than that, I have to give tremendous credit to the editors for knowing what scenes to cut, even though I think some of these could have stayed in. I think they knew that if a scene wasn't absolutely essential, it should be cut, including trimming scenes down. And I think that, and so I give them tremendous credit. And again, it's nice seeing these three Spider-Men interact as long as possible, but it does kind of seem like trimming it down, like I said, was probably the right move. There are some funny lines here, and I do... It's like one of my favorite deleted parts was Peters like, we got to do this again, just like without the data and everything. It's like Maguire, because it shows that more of like the Garfield's kind of like the middle brother of them, and Maguire's like the older one. Because Maguire's like, can we focus on like not dying here? It's like, and Garfield's like, oh yeah, I'll get your number. I'll get your number after the battle. And it's like, that's pretty funny, but I understand why it was axed. And then there's a new post-credit scene. And here's the thing. This is supposed to be like a photo montage-ish of the other two films, like of Homecoming and the trip they went to Europe. But and the idea is that it's showing that Peter Parker was erased from everyone's memories because he never shows up. I get what they were going for. It didn't quite work. Now, this was a little better than just having a freaking Multiverse of Madness trailer at the end. That still pissed me off. I'm like, I sat here for like 5 minutes straight just staring at these credits for a trailer that I've already seen. Great. And originally there was like a original scene that there was going to be an end credit scene that showed how Garfield and Maguire's realities were affected by the spell, but I guess they never filmed it, because that would have been a much better end credit scene to have. And this scene isn't bad. Like, I get what they were going for, but I don't think it quite worked, because if you're not paying it, if I didn't know that ahead of time, I probably wouldn't have even noticed. They give a lot of extra screen time to Betty Brant in this extended edition, and while I don't have a problem with the actress who plays her, this character is just kind of obnoxious. I didn't care for her in Far From Home, though I don't remember her being too insufferable. She was just kind of there as a running joke. She has no purpose in this story. She's the reporter at Midtown. She's like the school reporter. And that's all she does throughout this entire film. So I don't know why they felt the need to give her so much screen time. But yeah, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I think the extended version is actually worse than the theatrical cut. I loved the theatrical cut. I thought it was a phenomenal movie. It wasn't a 100% perfect movie because it had some mistakes, including a plot hole involving Electro because he doesn't know who Peter Parker is, so he shouldn't be there. But I'm able to let stuff like that go. But when they're advertising this as the more fun stuff version, and most of this is just extended scenes that didn't need to be extended, scenes that were axed for good reason, and a few scenes that I think could have been kept in the theatrical cut. Because again, a few of these scenes I think would have really enhanced the story. The extended school sequence could have really enhanced it, minus the interview sequence. Good God. I think the short scene with Happy and Murdoch could have been in the film. That 8-second clip of them in the elevator, I guess it could have been in. And you could have thrown in the extended three Spideys talking on the scaffolding. But all these other scenes, like the extended Sanctorum montage, wasn't needed. The extra bugle scene, again, it was kind of funny, but it didn't need to be there. The Harry Holland scene was awful. And the new end credit scene just didn't quite work. But I still love this movie. I've seen it several times because I own it on DVD. So I've seen it several times, and I don't regret seeing the extended version, but this is definitely worse than the theatrical cut. Like I said, I have to give tremendous credit to the editors because they knew exactly what to keep and exactly what to cut to get it to a pretty long but feasible 2 hours and 28 minutes. I don't know why I'd go out to see it. I don't know why I'd ever watch this version again. I don't know why I'd watch a 2 hour and 39 minute movie when I have a much better 2 hour and 28 minute version. So yeah, it's a long movie, but every scene was essential in that version. This one, there's a lot of just fucking around every once in a while. Because in the beginning, when there was a lot of extended scenes and everything, I felt the pace drag. I'm like, seems to be taking forever, but once the villains started showing up, where the extended scenes and the deleted scenes kind of stopped for a while, I felt the pace pick back up. Because the theatrical cut, it moves at a brisk pace. It doesn't drag. Like, it has a kind of a slow build-up at the beginning, but it doesn't drag. There's a difference between being slow and dragging ass. And the extended cut dragged 10 tons of ass for every once in a while. But yeah, I'm curious if anybody else is seeing the extended cut. It's actually making less money than I would have thought. It's made like $5.4 million over the weekend. I thought it was going to make a ton. I thought it was actually going to make quite a bit over the weekend. It ended up in 4th place for the weekend, which shocked the hell out of me, because I thought this was going to make bank in its second run, especially with it being advertised as an extended version, and it is. Honestly, I don't really recommend seeing the extended cut. You probably already own the movie, so just watch the theatrical cut. It's much better, and it doesn't have as much padding. There's a couple of decent scenes that you'd be missing out on, but just look them up. But just watch them on YouTube when they hit there. You won't be missing much else. So yeah, that's all I got for the Spider-Man No Way Home, the more fun stuff version, or I should say the more padded version. That's really what it should be called. And the next few days there will be some movies coming out for me to review, so I'll see y'all then. Bye.